The executive tower gleamed under the morning sun, its lobby a parade of power, silent ambition, and untouchable wealth. But amidst the blur of suits and polished shoes, one thing stood out: a little girl, alone. She tugged on the sleeve of the most powerful man in the building. "Sir, how much does a dad cost?" she asked, holding out a worn plastic hair clip like it was treasure. Ethan Cole, billionaire CEO, blinked. "Why would you ask me that?" She looked up, eyes steady. "Because my mommy cries at night, and I heard you fix everything." A billionaire CEO, a plastic butterfly hair clip, and a question that shattered his world. Stay until the end, because what she gave him wasn't a deal. It was a chance to be human again. Ethan Cole was the kind of man headlines were made for. At 36, he was already the CEO of Cole and Mercer Holdings, one of the most dominant investment firms in the world. Media outlets called him the Ice King, a title he never corrected. He didn't need to. Ethan didn't shout to be heard. He didn't rush to be first. He simply walked into rooms and made people recalibrate around him. Logic ruled his world. Risk was measured, feelings suppressed. His suit was always pressed, his voice even, his eyes unreadable. He made billion-dollar decisions before breakfast and silenced boardrooms with a single glance. Emotion had no place in his empire, or so he thought. It was a quiet Wednesday morning. The sun slid like a blade across the city skyline, cutting clean shadows across the sleek lobby of Cole and Mercer's headquarters. Marble floors, glass walls. Employees moved like clockwork, earpieces in, shoes polished, minds on profit margins. Ethan entered through the executive entrance, flanked by his assistant, two security guards, in silence. His day was scheduled down to the minute: strategy call at 9, investor luncheon at noon, private jet by 3. He wasn't supposed to stop, but someone did. Near the front desk, a small figure sat alone. A little girl, maybe 4, with tangled blonde curls and a too big denim jacket. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor like she belonged there. Like the cold stone beneath her was just another playground. In her lap was a pink backpack, faded, scuffed, covered in worn sparkles and stickers peeling at the corners. No one else noticed her, or pretended not to, but Ethan did. He slowed, then stopped. The girl looked up and met his eyes. There was no fear in her gaze, just certainty. He crouched slightly, careful not to crease his trousers, and said in a tone few had ever heard from him, "Are you lost?" She shook her head and stood, holding something in her tiny hand. A hair clip, a plastic butterfly, its wings dulled and chipped, a few rhinestones missing. She reached out and said simply, "Sir, can I buy a dad?" The words hit him like a quiet explosion. He froze. What?" he managed. She looked up, dead serious. "It's my best one," she said, referring to the clip. "You can have it if you help my mommy." Ethan stared at the object. He had no idea what to say. This was a man who had once negotiated a hostile takeover in under 40 minutes. But now, facing a child with outstretched fingers and a broken toy, he felt exposed. "Why do you want to buy a dad?" he asked finally, his voice lower. "Because my mommy cries every night," the girl said. "She hides it, but I hear, and someone told me you fix everything." Silence. The receptionist looked over nervously. His assistant whispered, "Mr. Cole, your board is waiting." But he didn't move. "What's your name?" he asked. "Mia," she said proudly. "I'm 4.5. I can share pancakes." Ethan gave the faintest smile. "That's a tempting offer." She didn't smile back. She just slipped her small fingers into his hand and whispered, "Please help, Mommy." And for the first time in years, Ethan Cole's logic failed him. He looked at the hair clip, then at Mia, then at the marble tower he had built with sweat, brilliance, and brutal resolve. "Cancel everything," he said softly. His assistant blinked. "Sir? You heard me." And with Mia leading the way, the Ice King stepped out of his fortress, unaware he had just made the most important investment of his life. Ethan Cole's world had never moved without a schedule. But that morning, everything unraveled. One moment, he was preparing for a board presentation on international market acquisitions. The next, he was walking hand in hand with a 4-year-old stranger through the streets of a city he thought he owned, yet somehow no longer recognized. Mia's small fingers clutched his tightly. She didn't look back to see if he was still following. She didn't need to. Ethan didn't ask questions. Not yet. He didn't even call for a car. He walked in his $1,000 leather shoes beside a child with glitter on her sneakers and a stuffed bunny poking out of her backpack. They passed high-rises, cafes, and boutiques Ethan had financed without ever stepping foot inside. The neighborhoods began to change. Sleek glass gave way to cracked brick, polished marble to worn concrete, and still they walked. Down a narrow alley, up a flight of rusted stairs with chipped paint and an iron railing that groaned under pressure, Mia finally paused in front of a green door with peeling numbers. From her backpack, she pulled out a tiny silver key and turned it like a ritual she knew by heart. The door creaked open. "Come in," she said simply, and disappeared inside. Ethan hesitated. This was not how his day was meant to go. This wasn't how any of his days went. But his feet moved forward anyway. The apartment smelled faintly of boiled rice and lavender fabric softener. Sunlight filtered through dusty curtains. A few crayons lay scattered on the floor. The walls were decorated with children's drawings, each one carefully taped as if they were masterpieces hung in a gallery. In the center of the room was a worn couch. On it, lying beneath a thin blanket, was a woman. Her blonde hair, duller now, was pulled back in a loose bun. Her cheekbones were sharper than he remembered, her skin paler. But he knew that face. He would have known it in a crowd, in a dream, in a decade. His voice caught in his throat. "Sophie," he whispered. The woman stirred, opened her eyes, and froze. "Ethan Cole?" she said, as if his name alone could summon a storm. He stepped closer, slowly. The world outside the apartment faded into static. It had been over 10 years. 10 years since he last saw her in the university library with a teal notebook and chipped nail polish, biting her lip as she edited essays in red ink. 10 years since she vanished without goodbye. Now here she was, frail, beautiful, real. "I didn't expect," he began. "Neither did I," she said hoarsely, trying to sit up but wincing from the effort. Mia was already at her side, wrapping small arms around her. "Mommy, this is him," she beamed. "The man I told you about." Sophie blinked, confused. "What?" Mia pointed proudly. "My dad. I told you I'd find him." Sophie looked at Ethan, something between pain and apology flickering in her tired eyes. "She doesn't understand," she murmured. "You're not—" "I know," Ethan said quietly. "She told me." They stood in silence. Finally, Sophie gathered herself and asked, "Why did you come?" "I didn't mean to," he admitted. "She found me." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the butterfly hair clip. It looked even smaller in his hand now. "She offered me this," he said, his voice quieter now. "Said it was payment. To buy a dad." Sophie pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. Her eyes welled. "She found it in a drawer a few weeks ago," she whispered. "It used to be mine back when—" She stopped herself, looked away. "I gave it to you," Ethan finished. "The night I was going to tell you how I felt." That night, the red scarf, the bookstore, the rain, and the letter he found the next day in his mailbox. "I'm sorry, please don't wait. Be who you're meant to be. Don't look back." He did everything that letter told him to, until now. "What happened, Sophie?" She looked up. Hollow, honest. "My dad died. My mom got sick. I dropped out. Took 2 jobs. I didn't want you to see me like that. Then, I married someone. He wasn't kind. I left when Mia was born." She paused, her voice cracked. "I didn't want your pity." Ethan took a slow breath. "You don't have my pity." They stood again in silence, but something had shifted. Mia had curled up beside her mother, drawing something with crayons. Ethan looked at the woman who once made him believe in forever. And suddenly the empire he built felt distant. He wasn't sure what to do next. But for the first time in years, he knew exactly where he needed to be. The apartment was quiet now, save for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the scratch of crayons against paper. Mia sat on the floor near the window, humming to herself as she drew. oblivious to the storm quietly unfolding in the room behind her. Ethan sat across from Sophie at the small chipped kitchen table. A cup of tea steamed between them, untouched. Neither spoke at first. The weight of time hung too heavily in the air. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again," Sophie finally said, her voice barely more than a whisper. Ethan's eyes didn't leave her face. "I waited for you. For months." She looked down, ashamed. "I know. I saw the messages. The emails. I even listened to one of your voicemails once. Then I deleted it." "Why?" he asked, not accusingly, just brokenly curious. She swallowed hard. "Because I didn't know how to respond. I didn't know how to explain everything without you looking at me differently." Ethan leaned back slightly, his voice quiet. "Try me." Sophie closed her eyes for a second, collecting fragments of a story she'd never had the courage to tell. "My father collapsed the week before finals. Stroke. Massive. He was gone within days. My mom, she unraveled. Her health got worse fast. I dropped out to take care of her, sold my books, my laptop, started cleaning houses, and when the medical bills piled up," she paused, her voice cracking, "I married someone I barely knew. He promised help, stability." Ethan's jaw clenched. "He hurt you." Sophie nodded, tears brimming. "Not just me." Ethan looked over at Mia, who was now carefully coloring in the petals of a crayon flower. "She was 3 months old when I left," Sophie said. "I took what I could carry. We slept in shelters, friends' couches. It took years to find even this tiny apartment." Ethan was silent for a long time. Not because he didn't know what to say, but because the ache in his chest made words feel small. "I thought you just walked away," he finally said. "I never stopped wondering why." She met his eyes, soft and sad. "I didn't want to be the girl who dragged you down. You had plans, Ethan. Grad school, a future. I was drowning. I thought cutting you off would protect you." "You were wrong," he said quietly. "I didn't need protection. I needed you." Sophie reached across the table, brushing her fingers along the edge of the plastic hair clip still sitting between them. "I thought I lost this," she whispered. "You didn't," Ethan said. "You left it in your notebook, the one you always carried." Her lips curved faintly. "Teal cover. Coffee stain on the corner." "You love that notebook," he said. "I love the one who gave me this clip," she replied, her voice softer now. "You handed it to me that day in the library. You said it matched my eyes and She blinked. "I knew you were going to say something that day. I ran before you could." Ethan looked at her for a long time, then said simply, "I never gave anyone else that kind of love again." The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was healing. Sophie looked toward the living room, where Mia now sat with a paper crown on her head, humming to herself. "She's not yours, Ethan," she said, "but she's the best part of me." Ethan didn't respond right away. Instead, he stood, walked over, and knelt beside Mia. She turned, held up her drawing, and said, "This one's for you." It was a stick figure of a man in a suit, holding hands with a little girl wearing a crown. The sun above them was huge and yellow. He smiled and ruffled her curls. "Thank you," he whispered. When he returned to the table, he looked Sophie in the eyes and said, "She may not be mine, but she already has my heart." Sophie covered her mouth, overwhelmed. Ethan reached for the hair clip, turned it in his fingers like something sacred. "She gave me this, thinking it was enough to buy a dad," he said. "She doesn't need to buy one. She already found one." Ethan Cole had designed his entire world around precision: contracts, deadlines, quarterly targets. Everything in his life had a blueprint, except this. 2 days after their reunion, Sophie hesitantly accepted Ethan's offer to stay at his estate. "Just for a little while," she'd said, "until I'm back on my feet." But even as she spoke the words, her voice carried the exhaustion of someone who hadn't stood firmly in years. He didn't push. He simply said, "There's space, and safety, and pancakes." Mia had cheered. Ethan had expected the transition to be strange. What he hadn't expected was how quickly the strangeness became beautiful. The Cole estate sat just outside the city, modern glass and stone, overlooking a tranquil lake. It had always felt cold to him, like a high-end hotel no one wanted to live in. Now it buzzed with a softness that hadn't existed before. Mia transformed it overnight. Her toys spilled across the marble floors like confetti. Her giggles echoed in the long, empty hallways. Her fingerprints smudged the walls of his once pristine home office. And Ethan? He didn't mind. He bought her star-patterned bed sheets and a reading lamp shaped like a cloud. He let her pick where to hang her crayon drawings. When she asked if her bunny could sleep on his couch, he said, "Only if he shares." Sophie, on the other hand, was slower to settle in. She lingered near the windows, always with one hand gently touching her scarf. She apologized too much for being tired, for coughing, for existing in a place that felt too big for someone used to making herself small. Ethan tried, awkwardly, to make her feel at home. He attempted to cook oatmeal one morning, burned it to a paste. He researched child nutrition, Googled how to help with chemo nausea, and even ordered a humidifier for her room without telling her. Still, she resisted comfort like it was something she hadn't earned. One night, just past midnight, he heard a sound, a sharp gasp, followed by frantic coughing. He rushed to the guest room. Sophie was doubled over at the edge of the bed, her body convulsing with dry heaves, hands trembling as she tried not to wake Mia, who slept just feet away. Without hesitation, Ethan knelt beside her, held her, whispered, "You're okay. I've got you." He didn't flinch when she got sick on the sheets. He didn't step away when she sobbed into his shirt. He stayed. That night he cleaned her up, made her tea, sat by her side until the sky turned pale. In the morning he didn't go into the office. Instead he called a doctor he trusted, one who would come to the house, who spoke in gentle tones, and didn't wear the kind of smile that pretended everything was fine. When Sophie tried to protest, to apologize again, Ethan looked at her and said quietly, "You are not a burden. Not now. Not ever." Later that day, they sat in the sunroom, Sophie in a soft robe, her skin pale but peaceful, Ethan beside her with coffee gone cold. They didn't talk much. They didn't have to. Mia was outside chasing butterflies in the garden, spinning in circles until she fell giggling into the grass. Sophie watched her through the open window, a faint smile ghosting her lips. "She doesn't remember the shelters," she said softly. "She remembers the love," Ethan replied. Sophie looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in days. "You're doing all this for a child that's not even yours." "She doesn't have to be mine, Wei," he said. "She already gave me more than I ever thought I'd have." Sophie blinked back tears. "You always did talk like a man who understood everything." "I don't," Ethan said honestly. "I'm just learning to show up." She nodded slowly. "You're doing better than most." Outside, Mia waved through the window, her curls a mess, her smile infectious. Ethan waved back, then looked at Sophie. "If you ever want to run again, let me walk with you this time." She didn't answer right away, but she reached out slowly and placed her hand on his. And in that fragile moment, full of illness, recovery, silence, and unspoken hope, something unshakable began to form. Not a romance, not a rescue, but a foundation, built not from blueprints, but from people choosing, every single day, not to walk away. Ethan Cole had once been a man defined by skyscrapers, stock prices, and solitude. Now every morning began with the soft sound of Mia's footsteps running down the hallway, and the not-so-soft sound of juice spilling somewhere nearby. He adjusted his tie with one hand while reading instructions for detangling curly hair with the other. Mia sat on a kitchen stool, bouncing her heels against the cabinets as he fumbled with a hairbrush and a blue ribbon. "Okay," he muttered. "How hard can a ponytail be?" Mia giggled. "Daddy, the bow goes on top, not under." He blinked. "Are you sure?" "I'm 4.5. I know things." Ethan exhaled in defeat, crouched beside her and smiled. "Deal, but you're going to have to teach me again tomorrow." 20 minutes later, they walked hand in hand into Little Pines Preschool, a building that smelled like crayons, wet sneakers, and mystery snacks. It was all bright colors and tiny voices, completely foreign territory for a man who'd once negotiated a merger in Geneva without flinching. Sophie had wanted to come, but that morning had been rough. Fatigue and nausea kept her curled on the couch, wrapped in the teal scarf he'd tied gently around her head the night before. She'd looked apologetic when she said she couldn't come. "You've got this," she whispered. And now, standing in the classroom, he wasn't so sure. A woman in a floral blouse and kind eyes approached. "Hi there, I'm Ms. Jensen. And you must be—" Ethan looked down at Mia, who squeezed his hand tighter. He straightened slightly and nodded. "I'm Ethan Cole, her dad." Ms. Jensen's smile widened. "Wonderful. Welcome, Mr. Cole." Across the room, a few parents glanced in their direction. One of them discreetly whispered something, eyebrows raising. He recognized the look. He'd seen it on magazine covers, at charity galas, in IPO meetings. But this time it didn't sting. Mia leaned close. "Are they talking about us?" He knelt to her level. "Maybe, but we're too cool to care, right?" She grinned. "Right!" He helped her hang her backpack on a hook labeled Mia H., kissed the top of her head, and told her he'd be waiting at the end of the day. As she dashed off toward the coloring station, her pigtails bouncing, he stood for a long moment, watching. Then he turned and walked out, heart heavier than expected. That afternoon, Ethan worked from his home office. He sent a few emails, reviewed a proposal, but his mind wandered back to finger paintings, stuffed bunnies, and a tiny voice asking if bows go on top. When he returned to his desk after a call, something new was waiting for him. A drawing, crayon lines, wild and crooked, stretched across the paper. 3 stick figures stood beneath a big yellow sun. One wore glasses and a tie, one had a blue scarf and a smile, and the smallest at the center wore a crooked paper crown. Above them, written in huge wobbly letters, was one word: Daddy. He didn't move for a long time. He didn't frame it, didn't take a picture. He just let it sit on the desk, letting the simplicity of it echo deeper than any closing bell or financial win ever had. In that moment, Ethan realized something he had never allowed himself to feel before. This wasn't a performance. This wasn't pity. This was presence. He hadn't been handed a child. He'd been invited into a life, one that had room for mistakes, juice spills, imperfect ponytails, and quiet victories. The kind drawn with crayons, the kind that whispered, "You belong here. You matter here. You are home." Spring came early that year. The lake behind Ethan's estate sparkled in soft ripples under a gentle breeze. Sophie stood by the window of the sunroom, watching the wind tease the water's surface like a painter smudging blues and silvers into motion. Her cheeks were fuller now. Her skin carried a flush of health. Her hair, once lost to chemotherapy, had started to grow back in short, soft waves of gold. She no longer apologized for her presence. She no longer asked if she'd overstayed. One morning, the doctor gave them news so simple it didn't feel real. The tumor's stable, no signs of spread. Sophie didn't cry. She just exhaled, for the first time in what felt like years. A few weeks later, they began planning something neither had dared imagine: a wedding. It wasn't a spectacle. There were no guest lists filled with CEOs or politicians, no golden envelopes or embossed invitations. Just a Saturday morning in late May, on the edge of the lake where Ethan had learned to make peace with silence, Sophie walked barefoot down a stone path, her silk gown flowing like whispered promises. Her hair was pulled gently to one side, pinned in place with the old faded butterfly hair clip, once offered as currency by a little girl who believed magic could fix things. Mia danced ahead, tossing white rose petals with all the ceremony of a queen's parade, her tiny hands flinging joy into the wind. Ethan stood under a wooden arch wrapped in lilies. No tie, no nerves. Just hands that trembled slightly as she approached. Hands that had once held contracts, power, wealth, and now held something far rarer. Sophie. They didn't follow a script. The officiant was a quiet friend of Ethan's, an old colleague turned spiritual counselor who spoke just enough to guide, then stepped back and let them speak for themselves. Ethan went first. "I found you when I thought I had nothing left," he said, "and you gave me everything I didn't know I needed." Sophie's voice quivered, but her eyes never left his. "You saw me when I couldn't recognize myself, and you loved me anyway. That love, it brought me back." When the words, "You may kiss the bride," were finally spoken, Ethan didn't hesitate. He kissed her like it was a vow, not to perfection, but to presence, to the promise that, "I will From this day forward, they would choose each other. Through it all, Mia clapped wildly, her crown of daisies sliding sideways on her head. "They did it!" she shouted, beaming. The guests, just a small circle of close friends, and the doctors who had walked with Sophie through her darkest hours, smiled through their tears. Later, as the sun dipped low and golden across the lake, Ethan and Sophie stood together on the dock, barefoot, the hem of her dress brushing the water's edge. Mia ran in circles behind them, her laughter catching on the wind like music. Sophie looked at Ethan. "I used to think life had passed me by," she said quietly. He smiled and pulled her close. "And I used to think I had everything, until I realized I had nothing that really mattered. No orchestra, no fireworks, just three people, barefoot and breathless, learning how to be a family. It wasn't grand. It was perfect, because it wasn't about status or second chances. It was about choosing every single day to love in the present, and sometimes choosing to believe that even the most broken beginnings can still lead to beautiful, lasting homes." In today's fast-moving world, where success is often measured in numbers, titles, and possessions, this story reminds us of something deeper, that sometimes the most important things in life can't be bought, bargained for, or scheduled. They're found in the quiet moments, in the small, steady acts of love, in the courage it takes to stay, to show up, to choose someone, especially when life gets hard. Ethan didn't plan for Mia or Sophie. He built empires, not families. But in one spontaneous act, listening to a little girl with a plastic hair clip, he began building something far more meaningful: a home, a purpose, a life rooted in heart, not headlines. And Sophie? She teaches us that no matter how much we've lost, we are never beyond being loved. Not for what we were, but for who we are, even in our most vulnerable state. What about you? What was your turning point? Have you ever had someone step into your life when you needed it most? Or maybe you were the one who showed up. Share your thoughts in the comments below. We read everyone. Let's talk about what family really means in today's world. If this story touched your heart, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to Warm Soul Stories, and turn on notifications. We share stories that remind us all: kindness is timeless, love is brave, and sometimes the smallest gesture, like handing someone a hair clip, can open the door to a brand new beginning. Thank you for listening. We'll see you in the next story.